You guys ready?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sure.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Metal Maniacs Podcast. Today we have a bio episode for you. I am your host, Jay Ingersoll, and I'm here with my co-host.
It's your boy, Mod.
What's up, Mod? How's it going today?
You know I'm still good, Jay.
Cool.
Glad to be here.
He said still good, so as if he wasn't good earlier. Anyway.
He could be better.
Yeah, we have a bio episode today, and we got a good friend of ours sitting in. This is one of his favorite bands, he says, so he's going to fact-check everything that I say, apparently.
Loosely.
So, welcome, Jon Rohn, to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome
Thank
back,
you for having
John.
me again.
Yeah, welcome.
Good to have you.
John will also appear on another episode, and actually he'll be a little more integral part of the conversation here in a couple weeks. You guys will hear that episode when it comes out. But as we go, today we're going to be talking about the almighty Slayer. So for me, before I dive into this, I'm just going to state this by, I think telling the Slayer story is very important for this podcast. Mm-hmm. Slayer wasn't necessarily one of my top favorite bands of all time or anything like that. I just think they set the stage for most of the things that we will talk about on this podcast. So just like with the death metal episode, I felt like I had to do diligence to Slayer and tell the story of Slayer, right?
Absolutely.
Because I could have picked, a different band or one of my favorite bands to go do the whole biography and study all this.
But you picked one of John's favorite bands.
Yeah, so that kind of works out. So,
Yes, sir.
and a lot of people's favorite band, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you're talking about Slayer fans, you guys are talking about, I hope I don't get knifed if I say something wrong fucking in the parking lot after we leave here, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, in the pantheon of rabid fan bases, Slayer's is up there. And not just in terms of music. I'm talking about all things, all things across the board. Harry Potter fans, World of Warcraft fans, Slayer fans, Rick and Morty fans, they're savage.
Yeah.
So, Slayer fans, we're just trying to do them justice. All respect to Slayer.
So a lot of my research, the way I research is I kind of go on Wiki first. I kind of take some points out of there, and then I'll go through and I'll go back through and I'll correct anything that's wrong. I've watched every fucking Slayer video on YouTube there is, anything on Slayer that I could read. I spent hours on this, and I'm actually pretty proud of what I did put together here, because a few, the first few that I did, I was just doing it to get content out, so obviously I wanted to state facts or whatever, as many good facts as I can, but I really deep dove into Slayer. I listened to their albums. I did as much work on this as I could to hopefully bring Slayer justice. So we are going to start this thing, and then we'll have some discussions along the way. This will be a two-parter just because Slayer's been a band for such a long time, and they got such a rich history. So we will dive into part one right now. 1981 was the year that both Nick and I started existing on this earth. Dallas was the #1 TV show. Pope John Paul II was shot twice. Ronald Reagan was sworn into office and in the same year attempted to be assassinated. REO Speedwagon's Keep On Loving You was on the charts, and the Boston Celtics won the NBA championship that year. But more importantly, for the sake of this show, the almighty Slayer was formed.
Yeah.
So Huntington Park, California is where guitarist Kerry King, guitar player Jeff Hanneman, drummer Dave Lombardo, and bassist vocalist Tom Araya would all meet to form and what would go on to be arguably one of the most important thrash metal bands of all time. Slayer is considered one of the big four in metal alongside counterparts Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax. Slayer's deep catalog consists of 12 studio albums, 3 live albums, 2 EPs, a cover album, and 6 videos. 4 of their studio albums snagged gold certification in the U.S. from 91 to 2013. Slayer moved 5 million copies in the U.S. alone and over 20 million globally.
That's incredible.
That's a lot of fucking...
That's a lot.
That's a lot of albums, man. And we're talking album sales,
true
moving
album
them
sales.
motherfuckers.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yes,
mean?
yes.
We're not talking about Spotify
Stream.
plays.
And
albums.
For some of maybe the younger people that are watching, you used to have to buy records. You had to go to the store.
Yeah.
You had to look at the goddamn thing and purchase it.
Yeah. Pull out
Right?
that 10 smack.
Yeah.
And then it became a 15 smack.
Yeah.
Then it came a 20 smack after that.
And this is fun for me because I have so many Slayer related stories for all this shit. So I'm excited, man. I'm so excited for this one.
They even snagged 5 Grammy Award nominations, taking home 2 wins, one in 2007 for Eyes of the Insane, and another in 2008 for Final Six, both from the Christ Illusion album that came out in 2006.
Nice.
Now, after thrashing the scene for over 3 decades, Slayer decided to wrap things up. Back in January 2018, they announced a farewell tour that spanned from May 18 to November 19, marking the end of an era for this iconic band.
Yeah, they did a couple of tours around the world at that time. I think.
Yeah. They were fucking machines with the tours. So
they said goodbye to everybody, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Slayer had a formula that worked with King, who, on a side note, he's an avid snake collector and has a warehouse full of them fucking things. Like, you can look him up.
Yeah, he's hardcore into snakes.
Yeah, he knows all these snakes and shit. And, like, it was just something I stumbled across. I remember hearing it before, but it was, like, one of the videos that came across the feed, right? So then you got Hanneman and Araya handling the lyrics and 2 guitar players respectively writing the music. Slayer's musical identity is firmly rooted in the realm of thrash metal. Reflecting to December 1986, an article in the Washington Post penned by Joe Brown cast Slayer as a speed metal force. Brown deftly defined this genre as an unholy blend of punk rock, thrash, and heavy metal, drawing in an almost exclusively male teenage audience. Nothing ever changes. In vivid terms, Brown captured Slayer's sonic essence. Quote, over a jackhammer beat, Slayer's stunned guitars created scraping sheets of corrosive metal noise with occasional solos that sounded like squealing brakes, unquote. And then it's not unquote. Over which the singer bassist emitted a larynx lacerating growl, yowl, whatever the yowl is. But yeah, that was still part of the quote.
I think a yowl is what a cat does.
Yeah. Tom definitely did some yowls back in the day. Another chapter in Slayer's classification unfolds in September 1988, piece by the New York Times, written by John Perales. He too labeled the band as speed metal, noting that they bring forth sensational imagery akin to tabloids and horror movies. Their lyrics, he observed, revel in death, gore, and allusions to Satanism and Nazism. The same article labeled other Big Four thrash metal bands such as Metallica and Megadeth as speed metal acts. So you got to remember around this time, like, these guys are pushing the boundaries, right? These guys are, they're wanting to be faster. They're wanting to be heavier. They're taking their influences. Obviously, Slayer's a little different, and we'll talk about their influences, but, the Metallica, the Megadeth, they're all kind of pushing the boundaries, and we're not quite getting to death metal yet.
No.
And we spoke about that in the death metal series, so if you want to go back and listen to episode 2, that is, of the Metal Maniacs podcast, we kind of talk about Slayer's influence on some of those bands in that genre there, but we're not quite to the death metal phase, and that's why I thought telling Slayer's story was such an important part of what we could talk about on this podcast, because these guys, with the darker, with the heavier, with the faster, that's what the Metal Maniacs is all about, right? That's what this podcast is about. That's what the magazine was about. So we are setting the stage for what is to become the reason why we're fucking sitting here right now, right? So we owe that to Slayer, whatever way you feel about them, and the listener as well. Fucking pay give them their flowers. You know what I'm saying?
Doesn't matter how you feel about it. They set the stage.
Yeah. So Slayer's earliest endeavors were lauded for the breakneck velocity and masterful instrumental prowess, seamlessly melding the tempos of hardcore punk and the ferocity of speed metal. Their output was marked by unrelenting speed and aggression. Notably, the album Rain and Blood stands as their fastest, clocking an average of 220 beats per minute. The record Diablos in Musica marked a turning point, introducing C-sharp tuning, while God Hates Us All made history with drop B tuning and 7-string guitars tuned to B flat. All Music, we've talked about All Music. I got a little side note here. We talk about All Music in this podcast a few times.
Sure.
Well, All Music, you can look it up right now, because I wasn't real sure what it is. It's been cited a few times in some of the things that we've looked up. They must have been doing this for a long time. Now you can find it on the internet, but it must have been like a publication or.
Okay.
But literally, they like review every fucking album there is, from metal to folk rock to flute fucking rock, whatever it is. Like, like I actually looked it up because I keep seeing this come up in a lot of the, things that were looking up, so I was like, I have to find out what it is. But AllMusic cited the album as abandoning the extravagances and accessibility of their late 80s, early 90s work and returning to perfect the raw approach, saying that was the God Hates Us All. Sure. And then with some fans labeling it as new metal. I don't really think God Hates Us All was new metal. I could see the Diabolos and Musica, but I'm just saying what AllMusic said there, so... The dueling guitar solos of King and Hanneman have been hailed as wildly chaotic, yeah, you could say that again, and twisted genius, a testament to their distinctive creative prowess. Slayer's original drummer, Lombardo, carved his legacy through the utilization of 2 bass drums, earning the moniker Godfather of Double Bass. His intense speed and aggression underscored this title, as evidenced by the techniques he employed. Lombardo's rationale for using 2 bass drums was astute. He prevented the muffled resonance that arises when the bass drum head is hit in a rapid succession. His 2 bass drum technique was executed using the heel-up approach. So, for people that aren't familiar with like actual technical terms, there's a lot of ways to play play double bass. Mm-hmm. So heel up is like when you're flailing the knees and the heel itself is off the bass drum pedal and you're pushing down with the front of your foot. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, at that time, that was probably pretty standard practice. Sure, now, for the average listener, we have other techniques that are involved in double bass drumming. You got like the swivel technique where the bass drum basically you swivel your foot from left to right, and the bass drum hits basically twice, once when you're swiveling left and once when you're swiveling right. You got the heel-toe approach that you push on the pedal, and the front of the foot hits, and then when you push the foot back, the beater hits the bass drum again. So you get 2 strokes. It's called the double stroke technique. And then there's other approaches where people keep their heels down as well and just fucking go that way. So there's a lot of different approaches to doing the double bass, especially with being more efficient and being faster, nowadays. But back then he did the heel up approach. So that's just for context here. So when crafting new material, the band first carved out the music structure before weaving in the lyrics. King and Hanneman would often employ a 24-track and drum machine to showcase a new riff to the band, seeking their insights. Opinions would flow, and potential alterations were discussed by King, Hanneman, and Lombardo if necessary. The central song structure took shape as the band jammed on the riff, with lyrics and solos thoughtfully interwoven to create the final sonic tapestry. So, let me just see something. Okay, cool. We're still on the intro here, so this is going to be a long one, folks. Just to let you know, there's a lot here for Slayer. So
just getting started.
Yeah, we are just getting started. So Slayer has been considered to be controversial over the years, with their lyric topics about war, death, Satan, serial killers, crime, religion, fascism, racism, and other dark topics. Slayer album art was just as controversial, with images of demons, bloods, pentagrams, and Satanism. Tom Araya was quoted with saying, "They did this to separate themselves from Hollywood community." Basically, the Hollywood community was the hair bands, right? So he says Hollywood, but it's more of
a specific scene.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then he basically said it was just to fuck with people because it's fun to be scary, right? In the early lineup, the trio of King, Hanneman, and Araya all contributed to the band's lyrical canvas. While King and Hanneman took the reins of composition, often with input from Lombardo and occasionally from Araya, notably a lyric writing partnership flourished between Araya and Hanneman, at times overshadowing King's creative input. As Hanneman aptly articulated, the creative process was a free-for-all, a fluid exchange where most compelling ideas prevailed, regardless of their origin. Side note, as a band should be.
Sure.
Like, for me, I feel like it's like everybody, someone has to make the final decision, right? Someone has to be the leader and say, okay, this is what we're going with. This is what we're sticking with. This is what we got to do. But in the meantime, when you're 4 guys in a room, like, let's make the coolest shit that we want to make, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. And so I always thought that was cool. And just a side note, I think it might be a little more in part 2, but we'll talk about, I say at times overshadowing King's creative input, but that was kind of at the beginning of Slayer. That was like a feeling that was had at the beginning. later on down the road, as we make more albums and we do more tours, that's not such the case, all right? So talking a little bit about the controversy of Slayer, I'm going to go into a little bit of that, and then we'll go into, like, I believe right after that we will kind of talk, we'll get some Slayer stories from us personally and talk a little bit about what they mean to us and a few stories. But I just want to go into a little controversy that
gotta have it
that they had. So, what's up? Go ahead.
Being kind of like a historian type of dude with military and war, like there's a lot of shit. I could go into 45 minutes of context of certain subjects because there's really, really touchy shit with Slayer.
Yeah, I'm waiting. I know.
And it's two things are true. Is it touchy? Yeah. They're called Slayer.
Yeah.
They're not baking fucking cookies.
Right.
They're out here like we watch movies about this horrific shit and it's cool. And I'm a little passionate about Slayer and caffeinated, so I'm gonna fucking so. But it
you're gonna like Slayer too.
Well, there's controversial shit, but at the same time, they're called Slayer.
Yeah,
like the point was to be vicious, aggressive, over the top, mean, nasty, violent. Like,
and to your point, John, we watch war movies and we think nothing of it. It's entertainment, it's historical, it's it's all. But the minute that Slayer starts to go there, and it's oh my God, these guys are Nazi fascist worshiping, evil,
right?
And it's like, no, welcome to the movie side of the music industry. It's entertainment, folks.
Yep.
Like, don't get your panties in a twist. They are Slayer, and if you don't like it, move on.
Yep, amen.
All right, so we'll get into a little bit of that here too. In 1996, the parents of Elise Poller took the band to court, asserting that their lyrics had emboldened their daughter's murders. Elise suffered a harrowing fate, subjected to drugging, strangulation, stabbing, trampling, and rape, all orchestrated as a malevolent sacrifice by 3 deranged fans. 4 years later, in a judicial revelation in May 19, 2000, the court asserted that Slayer and its business affiliates were disseminating detrimental products among teenagers, spurring violent deeds through their lyrical content. The court claimed that none of the vicious crimes committed against Elise Marie Poller would have occurred without the intentional marketing strategy of the death metal, loosely death metal.
Sure.
I got here, it says LOL, shows that they don't know their subgenres.
Let me give you a lesson here in the courtroom.
So, and then it says, would have occurred without the intentional marketing strategy of the death metal band Slayer. However, the legal crescendo was ultimately silenced in 2001 and dismissed for several reasons, including the pillars of free speech and perceived absence of duty and foresight. So that was like a fucking, what was that? Like a 4-year fucking case against them or whatever. So a second lawsuit filed by the parents, an amended plea for damages encompassing Slayer, their label, and other industry entities. This encore too met dismissal. Judge E. Jeffrey Burke put it succinctly, declaring, "I do not consider Slayer's music obscene, indecent, or harmful to minors." So thank you for that, Judge.
Yeah,
Judge
I think
Jeffrey.
Parents in these cases, they want to find some sense of closure and find some place to put blame. But putting it on artists and art is definitely the wrong way to go about getting closure. So
yeah, for sure. So in a cloud of controversy, Slayer has been marred with accusations of Nazi affiliations. The band's eagle logo, reminiscent of the eagle atop a swastika, stirred suspicion, as did the haunting lyrics of Angel of Death. The track was born from the dark seeds of Joseph Mengele, the Auschwitz doctor notorious for heinous human experience during World War II, earning the grim moniker Angel of Death from the camp's victims. Amidst the tempest, the album Christ Illusion became a focal point. Its provocative artwork resulted in a seeping recall and destruction of all Indian stocks. When they say Indian stocks, I'm assuming all the stock that was like sent to India, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
This depiction featured Christ submerged in a sea of despair with amputated limbs and vacant eye socket amidst a sea of blood and severed heads.
It was cartoonish, though.
Yeah.
It was super cartoonish.
Yeah, for sure.
It's pretty cheesy.
Yeah.
The visuals stirred intense protest among Christian groups, leading Joseph Diaz of the Mumbai Christian group Catholic Secular Forum to take a strong stance, railing against the original album artwork. EMI India heeded the call, declaring all stocks obliterated on October 11, 2006 with no intention of resurrecting the record on Indian shores. So that's just some of the controversy that surrounded Slayer throughout their years and you know, the impact that it did have, because these guys were kind of from the beginning pushing shit that hasn't been pushed before, inverted crosses, fucking, you know, Satanism,
just the imagery in
all
general.
that.
We've got
like these guys were the OGs of that shit.
Yeah,
like,
we've got decayed Christ, we've got demons flying around, ripping bodies apart, we've got pentagrams, we've got inverted crosses, we got the whole ball of wax here, man. If it's Satan, it's for you, it's Slayer.
Yeah, for sure. As stated on our second episode, the death metal episode, we did reference Slayer quite a bit in there because of their impact on death metal. So it's hard to find an early extreme metal band, hell, most bands of today still, that were not influenced by some way by Slayer.
Yeah, I agree.
We speak on the legacy at the end of the second part of our series, so we'll go into the legacy of Slayer on part 2. But right now, I'll just tell you what, like I said, I opened this up by saying that, you know, Slayer wasn't necessarily one of my favorite bands, but I did like a lot of their shit. I bought a lot of their albums. They had a fucking shit ton of songs I like. I love their videos. Like, I really loved what they stood for. I didn't get into Slayer until like after I was into heavier shit though. So I didn't realize the impact that they had made. And also with some of these other bands, and Nick and I have spoke on this before, I kind of started at Slayer in the middle. So when you start on a band in the middle, you take it for what it is, because you kind of start, you know, I think it was Seasons of the Abyss, something like that. The dudes I used to hang out with, Garvey and all that, they fucking would always be cranking Seasons of the Abyss and South of Heaven. Those were kind of the two, you know. Well, obviously we'll deep dive into those albums, but that's kind of where my Slayer started. So getting into that and then going back to some of the earlier works, it was kind of like such a different thing for me,
very
you
different.
know. So I really never got into their older works. It was just one of those things where it's like I wanted to have them so I could add them to the collection. But I didn't just fucking crank Show No Mercy. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't. It wasn't nothing that I was like, oh, I fucking love this shit or whatever. But with that being said, you know, I've seen Slayer a couple times and fucking, you know, I give them their flowers, and that's why I'm doing this.
I jump in like probably with Divine Intervention, and that's got to be the most brutal. I mean, Rain and Blood, most historical, most, you know, pushing the envelope type, you know, thrash metal album. But I dive in, you know, after South of Heaven, after Seasons in the Abyss. Then we get to, you know, Divine Intervention, and this is just a well-oiled machine. I mean, we're talking, these guys are probably at the top of their game right here. And I say that because they've done everything up to this point with the genre. They've gone through the thrash, you know, they instigated death metal with Hallowed and prior work, and then they get to the most intense thrash metal album with Rain and Blood, and then you move on to the melody with South of Heaven and Seasons in the Abyss, both heavily melodic, a lot of groove, and then you kind of go back with a fresh take on Rain and Blood, and you create Divine Intervention, and I think, personally, that's my favorite, and also, in my opinion, their best work.
I agree. I agree 100%. But
that's just me.
As we're going through this, we'll talk about that a little more. But I definitely agree. I fucking love Divine Intervention, and I'll tell you what they feel about Divine Intervention as we get into this.
Sweet.
And but for me, I fucking love that album. I just love it, man.
John, jump in.
That record was my first foray into Slayer was Seasons in the Abyss.
Okay.
I from my older brother, and it was, again, we said this earlier, but it was just the disc. So I didn't see the image. I didn't know what they looked like.
Right.
I just remember listening to Expendable Youth over and over.
Okay.
There's something about the groove of that song. When
Catchy
it was
hook,
easy accessible for like a younger kid to listen to, and rough. You know, like the lyrics, I'm going, oh shit.
Yeah.
But that whole record from front to back to me is
that
to me, that is like, if I could only have one Slayer record, it's going to be Seasons. But
Okay.
I like Divine Intervention. I thought the production sounded weird, but I like the songs.
Yeah.
You know, I know that we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. But
Yeah,
still, it was just
okay.
I figured we'd all jump in with where we started with Slayer.
Yeah. Mine was Seasons, and there's always that special place for me in the Seasons in the Abyss video. That was the pyramids. I don't know what the hell the pyramids had to do with this song, but who cares? It was cool.
We'll talk about that too as well.
Yeah.
Now, see, for me, like, and we talked about this as well, but like, it can be overwhelming, right? There's so much music. You can only listen to so much a day. And then at this time, I was into a lot of different music. It's not coming out like it is nowadays and hard to keep up with all these bands and some of the bands that we've discussed. But even at that time, it was like Slayer going forward after Divine, like I didn't get into it as much either. It's kind of like that's where it started and kind of ended for me. Where like I would put on, Christ Illusion just in the background or whatever, but I never really got into it like I really love Divine. I never really like picked up, the other albums down the road and really probably gave them their due diligence either. You know what I mean? They kind of, but one thing about Slayer is it's hard not to listen to the very beginning of the catalog and then listen to the end and know it's still the same fucking band. Diabolus is probably the only weird outlier. You could say Undisputed Attitude, but that is a cover record too. So at the same time, you can't really put that in there. And so that's just kind of where I'm at with Slayer. So
they're consistent. Their whole catalog is pretty consistent, but even in and of itself, there's some diversity among the albums. Like we just talked about it. Yeah. There's the Raging Rain in Blood, and then there's the Melodic Seasons in the Abyss, and they weren't that far away from each other either. They're all really
between them.
Yep. They're just one short album in between them both, but yeah, there's variety there, and I know that people are gonna say, "Oh, Slayer all sounds the same." It doesn't really. It's all Slayer.
Yeah,
but it doesn't. It's not all the same. It's just all a brand of Slayer.
Right.
So, yeah, the stuff after Divine, I'm with you there. At that point, the catalog's so big already, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Same with Metallica. You get to a point with Metallica maybe, and you're like, I'm pretty good on Metallica. Yeah. I don't really need to hear another Metallica album. Sure. And it's no diss. It's just, it is what it is.
It is what it is. So, all right. So what I just gave was the overview of Slayer, right? It just kind of, this is who they are, this is their sound or whatever. Now we're going to dive right into the beginning of Slayer, okay? So
From the top.
We're starting at the top. So we go back to the early 80s when Slayer came onto the scene. Kerry King, Jeff Hanneman, Dave Lombardo, and Tom Araya, who, on a side note, had never heard metal music before until Kerry King showed him metal music. So he's like, hey, let's be in a band. But by the way,
Jeff, you mean?
What?
For Jeff? Are you talking about Jeff hadn't heard
metal? No, Tom Araya hadn't heard
okay.
metal before. Jeff was a big punk fan.
Yes.
So that's where his influence came in. But yeah, Tom Araya had never even heard metal before he joined up with these guys, and Kerry King was like, well, for the band we're going to start, you might want to listen to this stuff.
Sure.
So kicking things off in 1981, right in Huntington Park, California. At the start, they were all about jamming out covers from the likes of Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, and Venom. The early days were all about hitting up parties and clubs around Southern California, bringing those legendary covers to life. Another thing that I seen about them, they were very diligent. They would be like jumping the fences at schools, peppering all the lockers in there to get people to come watch their fucking band. They were like hitting it hard, like, hey, come fucking see Slayer, like come worship the devil with me.
Things you had to do to get fans before social media.
Mm-hmm. And one fun, even it's an early mention about it is that Kerry was like a profound, like he almost taught Jeff how to play that style. So Jeff played guitar, but Kerry was substantially better.
Oh yeah,
and he had to kind of bring Jeff along into that point, and then obviously Jeff, developed his own style. And I'm super biased on Jeff Hanneman. So I love Jeff Hanneman.
Yes.
So
same.
In the early Slayer days, you can't help but envision their wild image, drenched in satanic vibes, pentagrams. It says makeup here, but it was more just eyeliner. They didn't wear like the fucking corpse paint. So I don't want people to get misconstrued with that. It was like, we'll wear the eyeliner, but we're going to do it more of in a satanic way and not a girl way, because Kerry King was quoted saying that several times, like saying that these guys are fucking girls and we're just trying to be men, So then spikes and then inverted crosses. You see the spikes where he made all his homemade outfits with the fucking
studs
all
and all
the
that
studs
shit.
and all the fucking nails coming out of there. So according to Dave Lombardo, they almost went with Wings of Fire as their name before settling on Slayer. Lombardo's the genius. No shit.
Wings of Fire.
Lombardo's the genius behind their iconic logo. He thought it like a murderer carving it out with a knife. So they were all like sketching stuff, trying to come up with ideas, and then he kind of put one there. And then, as you notice, the Slayer logo is actually kind of on a slant, but that's because Lombardo was a lefty. So when he scribbled it in, that's just the way it slanted. Yeah. So that's like the one they kind of went with or whatever. But they envisioned it as if like a murderer had a fucking knife and he scratched it into somebody. So
that tracks.
Yeah, it tracks. So We're gonna fast forward to '83. Slayer got a shot at opening for Bitch at the Woodstock Club in Anaheim, California. They rocked out 8 songs, 6 of which were covers. And here's where fate played its hand. Brian Slagle, once a music journalist turned founder of Metal Blade Records, was there and saw their potential. He met the band backstage and had a proposition. How about recording an original track for his upcoming compilation album, Metal Massacre 3? So Metal Massacre 2 actually boasted Hit the Lights by fellow emerging thrashers in Metallica. So if that gives you any idea
he was
of kind
pivotal.
of what that was, what that scene and what was going on at then, that, you know, so Hit the Lights by Metallica, right?
And Brian was like the guy back then.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
I mean, he's still the fucking guy, man.
If younger people aren't familiar, go read about Brian Slagle.
Yeah, he did a lot of heavy lifting for heavy metal's sake.
Yeah.
He might be a good topic episode too down the road. So
For sure.
Tom Araya said that they went and copped the other Metal Massacre tapes and studied what was on there, but he deemed that they wanted to be faster and heavier. He was like, this is metal, but we're doing it even faster and heavier. So Slayer said yes, and the song Aggressive Perfector dropped in the middle of '83, making some waves. The buzz was real, and Brian Slagle didn't hesitate to offer them a recording contract with Metal Blade, and begins the rise of the thrash gods themselves. So that's kind of how everything started. They got noticed and everything. And now we're going to move on to like the years 83 through 85 here. So without a huge recording budget, they had to make something happen to fund the album. Brian gave them what they could, but they had to come up with the rest of the money to record. So Tom Araya was famously working as a respiratory therapist, and Kerry King like got some money from his dad so they could hit the studio to pay for the rest of the budget. So they hit the studio in November '83, getting their debut album rolling. They got the tracks out within 3 weeks, recording late at night when the studio was closed to the public, is what they said. They had to like record after hours in order just to get in there because the studio was booked or whatever. So they're like, we just need to do it and get it out. A side note on here, Dave also recorded, when Dave recorded the drums, he actually recorded the drum shells themselves and cymbals at a different time. So he says when you go back to listen to it, you can hear that they're a little bit off because he had to record the cymbals different than the shells because the producer was like, yeah, the fucking cymbals are washing through the toms and stuff too much and I can't get a good, clean recording. So
that would be so weird.
Yeah. And that's what he said. So he's like, if you really listen to it, like there's a little bit off because he's like, I always kind of play stuff a little bit different. I mean, you always kind of do anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, and then the album hit the shelves by December 1983. Show No Mercy was its name, dropping through Metal Blade Records. A side note here, the cover art was actually painted by Kerry's friend's dad. At the ripe age of 19, this started their underground buzz. So these kids were 19 years old when Show No Mercy dropped. So with
rambunctious teenagers.
Yeah, exactly. With that album making waves, Slayer hit the California club circuit to amp up their promotion. The tour is like rocket fuel for their popularity. Show No Mercy sold over 20,000 in the U.S. and another 20,000 worldwide.
That's something back then.
Yeah.
That's
massive.
Yeah, I would take that today.
Yeah, no shit. No internet, no anything. Yeah.
I would take that today.
In February '84, King took a detour and joined Dave Mustaine's Megadeth. It was a brief stint, 5 shows, and then he was out, saying Megadeth was chewing up too much of his time. This move, though short, planted the seeds of a feud that would last between these bands for a while, 15 years.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know how they could have fit both of their egos in the same room. That's probably part of it,
bro.
You know,
I was gonna say, bro, they might have been chewing up a lot of his time, but let's keep it real. They hate each other, or they did.
Yeah,
they fucking hated each other.
And Kerry actually said in an interview that I was watching, like he later stated that like they didn't talk for like 15 years, even though they played some tours, and we'll get into that. So they must have just been like giving each other the cold shoulder, like kind of fuck you or whatever, you know, but we'll play the same show type shit. But he was stated that he was like, I got to thinking about it, and I don't really know why we didn't talk for 15 years. It's like, it just shows you that fucking just being a kid and how dumb you can be and how much of communication's a motherfucker. Also, side note, Gene Hoglan was actually a friend of the band that used to come to shows and take pictures.
That's cool.
So also while they were recording the album, he would like sit and hold Dave's bass drum in place because it was moving all around. So like Gene was around the scene.
Yeah.
Like there was like a rumor there that he was like a roadie, but they shot that down and said he was never a roadie or anything. It was just like a friend that was always around. So Gene Hoglan was hanging out with Slayer when they first fucking came around. So I thought that was a cool little fucking tidbit there. So in June 84, Slayer dropped a 3-track EP called Haunting the Chapel. It was darker, more thrash-infused than their debut, and it kind of set the stage for where they were headed. The opening track, Chemical Warfare, became a live staple, playing at nearly every show since 1984. So with that EP and then going on to like, you know, the album beforehand, Show No Mercy, you can hear almost some of like the Venom and like I would dare say like fucking, I don't want to put this in a way that you're offended, but fuck off, butt rock influences. Like, you know what I mean? It was a little bit happier, it was a little bit
more,
more
bouncy.
Yeah,
almost.
It was bouncy.
Yeah.
It was maidenish. It was, you know,
it was there.
Yeah, it was kind of, you know, when you're getting started, you're playing what fucking you listen to. So, but with Haunting the Chapel EP, that's when they were like, okay, this is starting to like, now we're coming into our own, right?
Getting a little more evil.
Yep, exactly. So now 85 was a big year. First up, a national tour with Venom and Exodus, leading to their first live home video titled Combat Tour, The Ultimate Revenge. It was a montage of live action filmed at Studio 54 Club from the tour. So I watched this video, and Exodus on this video sounded sonically the best. Like, they sounded tight, everything was polished. Venom was just girly, and the music was horrible to me. That's why you'll see in 2 episodes when I mentioned that, this was like, I really just sat there and watched it, and I was just like, not for me. But if you like Venom, cool for you. And Slayer, while being faster and heavier, they also were a little bit noisier, and the solos were just like
wild.
Oh yeah, it was just like we don't care about keys, we don't care about notes, we don't care how they fit together. We're just gonna fucking trim pick from this note to this note and then back to this note with a dive bomb. And there was a bunch of feedback and stuff, but it was cool to watch because that was like, you know, that was fucking back in the day. Like, you know, those bands kind of just fucking thrashing back in the day. And then, so then after that, Slayer took their skills across the pond to Belgium for the Heavy Sound Festival, sharing the stage with UFO. Throughout 85, Slayer kept the momentum, playing gigs with bands like Megadeth, Destruction, and more. And that's what I was saying. Like, they played with Megadeth again, so it just must have been like, even though they were feuding, they must have just been playing the same shows, right? Like,
but like, how much money was around back then? There's only so many shows. It's not like today where you have Wacken and you have all the huge, you know, Hellfest and all. It was you were playing what you were offered, and you know they were probably making.
I'm sure it wasn't so bad that it was like, oh, I can't be in the same room with that guy. It's just like, yeah, he and I, oil and water, whatever. You know, it's not that big a deal.
And it's like you're moving your shit in, they're getting off stage, you're fucking warming up backstage. You're not like fucking hanging out all the time. And we know how shows go. It's not always like that anyway. You're more worried about you fucking playing and you know, your shit anyway. So
for any performers out there, you know how it is. You're barely rapping with the other bands until both of you are done.
Yeah.
So, and then at that point, you can avoid each other if you want.
Exactly.
Especially on a big event like that.
So their debut album's success, with over 40,000 copies sold, paved the way for their second full-length album. Metal Blade put some bucks on the table, and the band got to work with producer Ron Flair. Hell Awaits dropped in March 85, darker than ever, with songs about hell and Satan. Go figure. It was their most intricate work yet, with longer and more complex songs. The title track starts with a creepy backward recording saying, "Join us," before launching into the madness.
Sign on.
The album was a hit, earning them awards in the British magazine Metal Force's 1985 Readers' Poll, Best Band, Best Live Band, Best Album for Hell Awaits, and Dave Lombardo scoring Best Drummer. So within 4 years or so, Slayer was already making an impact on the heavy metal ethos. So, moving on. After the triumph of Hell Awaits, Slayer found themselves with an intriguing proposition. Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin, the masterminds behind Def Jam Records, a predominantly hip-hop label, extended an offer. The band decided to seize the opportunity, venturing into new territory. With the guidance of an accomplished producer and a backing of a major label budget, Slayer embarked on a sonic transformation for their third album, Rain in Blood. The result? Shorter, faster tracks sporting a cleaner production Out went the intricate arrangements and lengthy songs from Hell Awaits, replaced by stripped-down, hardcore punk-influenced structures. Is that fair to say, John?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then that record is.
Yeah, I don't think there's a song over 3 minutes on that bad boy.
Good.
And sometimes you got to get in and get the fuck out.
Yeah.
I love
Dude,
it. I love it.
It's the most efficient metal record.
Yeah.
I know.
Wait, what are we talking? 29 minutes?
28, 26, something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not
so
long, under 30.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, efficient.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
So, however, the path to releasing Rain and Blood was not without hurdles. The release coming shortly after, Tipper Gore and the PMRC, Parents Music Research Center, were making a stand in '85 to introduce warning labels or parental advisory labels on record combating Slayer's evil presence and influence on the kids. The band's song Angel of Death, delving into the horrors of Holocaust concentration camps and Nazi physician Joseph Mengele's human experiments, met resistance from Columbia Records, Def Jam's distributor. The controversy led to Geffen Records taking on the album's distribution back in October 7, 1986. But Geffen, if you look at that record, Geffen didn't even put their logo on it. They were kind of like, yeah, we'll distribute this, but when anything comes back to us, we don't have nothing to do with it, so you can't fucking get with us.
Yeah, don't kill the messenger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're like, we know it'll sell, but wash the blood from our hands, literally.
Yeah,
you know.
Especially that little touchy. You know what I mean?
Despite the lack of radio airplay, Rain and Blood managed to breach the Billboard 200, reaching number 94, and secured the band's first gold certification in the United States. So they're like, fuck it, man. Satan's here to stay, buddy.
Satan. Don't forget World War II.
Yeah. So following the album's release, Slayer embarked on the Rain and Pain World Tour, sharing stages with acts like Overkill in the U.S. And from October to December 1986, and Malice in Europe in April and May 1987. Tours with bands such as Agnostic Front, Testament, Metal Church, DRI, Dark Angel, and Flotsam and Jetsam enriched their tour experience. The band even joined Wasp's U.S. tour as the opening act, although drummer Dave Lombardo decided to part ways just after a month. His reasons were simple yet impactful. Financial stability. He rejoined later that year, influenced by his wife's counsel. So he was just saying, he was like, this ain't really paying the bills exactly how I need it to. I need to pay like the fucking lights and the rent and whatever, and just Slayer's not doing it. So I don't have a whole lot of context for that, but I mean, that was just kind of
that
what
pretty
he
much
said.
tells the story.
Yeah. So in 1987, spurred by Rubin's persuasion, Slayer recorded a cover of Iron Butterfly's Inagata Devita for the movie Less Than Zero. Despite the band's dissatisfaction with the outcome, the track managed to grab radio airplay, making one of their first forays into mainstream airwaves. So
I enjoyed it. I don't know why the band didn't like it,
it's
but
fun.
I thought they did a good job with it. I'd listen to it still if I had it in my collection. I don't think I do, though. I forgot they did that, but I remember hearing it now.
Yeah, so do I. I remember.
It was fun.
Yeah, I mean, it helped them out whether they liked it or not. So
Sure.
sometimes that just happens in life, you know.
Yeah.
The story continued as Slayer re-entered the studio in late 1987 to create their fourth studio album. In contrast to the breakneck speed of Rain and Blood, the band made a conscious decision to slow down the tempo and integrate more melodic singing. Released in July 1988, South of Heaven evoked a mixed response from fans and critics. Nonetheless, it marked one of their most commercially successful releases, debuting at number 57 on the Billboard 200 and attaining gold certification. Throughout the journey, opinions on South of Heaven remained divided, with Kim Nelly of Rolling Stone labeling it, quote-unquote, genuinely offensive satanic drivel, while
dare he?
While AllMusic commented its disturbing and powerful essence. King expressed dissatisfaction with the performance on the album, while Araya considered it to be a late bloomer that eventually won people over. To promote South of Heaven, Slayer embarked on tours spanning from August 1988 to January 1989, supporting Judas Priest on the U.S. Ram It Down tour.
Oh, boy.
When I read that, I was like, oh, man. Fucking foresight. And
I'm out.
I mean, he wasn't really hiding it, was he? I think Halford was really.
I'm lightheaded.
I
we just couldn't see it coming, man.
Yeah, you got a tour name? Oh, I got one.
Yeah.
I got a few of them.
What's that mean? Oh shit!
Rob Halford is a god.
Yeah, man, he's got all the tour names.
I love it.
Traversing Europe with Nuclear Assault and the U.S. with Motorhead and Overkill. All right. So now we're going on to the 90s here.
All right, now it gets good.
Yeah,
Real good.
Yeah, we're starting getting into the 90s.
It was already
here,
good,
so.
but now it's getting real good.
Slayer's journey continued into the early 1990s with a return to the studio, teaming up with co-producer Andy Wallace for their 5th studio album. In response to the mixed reactions to South of Heaven, the band decided to infuse the pounding speed of Rain and Blood with their newly acquired melodic flair. This creative blend resulted in Seasons in the Abyss, which dropped on October 9th, 1990. It marked a significant moment for the band as it was their inaugural album release under Rubin's Fresh Deaf American label. So this is what you were referring to with the tape and the American label. This move followed Rubin's departure from Def Jam due to creative differences with Russell Simmons, the label's owner. Notably, Seasons in the Abyss debuted at number 44 on Billboard's 200 and later secured gold certification in 1992. The album also marked the birth of Slayer's first music video, shot against the awe-inspiring backdrop of the Giza pyramids in Egypt.
Yeah.
So that was their first music video, the one that you referenced, the pyramids. I don't know what that has to do with it, but like,
it's cool. Looks cool.
There's
though.
a camel in there too.
I think so.
Yeah, okay,
I'm pretty
cool.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a must in their first music video.
If you have a desert, you have to have a camel.
Yeah.
In Egypt.
Yeah,
for sure.
Come on.
The live scene beckoned once more in September 1990, with Slayer co-headlining the European Clash of the Titans tour alongside Megadeth, Suicidal Tendencies, and Testament. The tour's European leg witnessed an astounding demand, leading to skyrocketing black market ticket prices of 1,000 Deutschmark. In the U.S., that's $680 in 1990 for a ticket.
It's pretty standard for today.
Yeah, I mean that's that's
Ticketmaster,
a regular.
Yeah.
That's the surcharge now today.
Yeah. At your
The
local
handling
club
fees,
show,
yeah.
if Ticketmaster has
Yeah.
anything to do with it.
So, riding high on the wave of American thrash's popularity, the band embarked on another tour with Testament in early 1991. The summer of the same year saw them triple headlining the North American edition of Clash of the Titans tour, sharing the stage with Megadeth again, Anthrax, and the opening act, Alice in Chains. Now, what a fucking show that was!
Yeah,
Man,
Jesus, dude.
that's probably one of the best shows ever.
For you, that's fucking paradise.
Oh, that's all I need. Yeah.
Anthrax, Megadeth, and Alice in Chains, and then Slayer too.
I need,
Jesus.
just to top it off, and I need that time machine. So any day now, folks, I need to go back in time and see this concert.
So, to mark a decade since their formation, a band released a double live album called Decade of Aggression in 1991, which landed at number 55 on the Billboard 200. I actually bought this live double album. I remember it was like one of the first actual Slayer things I owned. There was a place down on Broadway called Recordings and More.
Okay.
And it was like a CD store, and it was all like used stuff.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was like, you could go in there and file through. Dave lived across the street from there. And we would just go in there and fucking go through CDs all day. But I remember snagging that one in there. And it was one of the first Slayer CDs that I actually owned, because it had like fucking all the hits on there too.
Yeah.
It was live, but it like had all the good shit on there. So I was like, okay, this is a cool one to have.
I still have my copy of that.
I liked that one, but it was Live Intrusion for me.
Oh yeah.
I needed that's the one that I had to have as I was discovering Slayer.
So as the calendar flipped to May 1992, drummer Dave Lombardo bid adieu to the band due to internal conflicts and his aspiration to be present for the birth of his first child. Lombardo would go on to form his outfit, Grip Inc., alongside Voodoo Cult guitarist Waldemir Sorchida. And sorry about that. That's one of those ones I just don't have.
It's all good.
I
don't think anybody in the room has that one.
Yeah, Waldemir, I'm sorry about that, homie. Fucking where's Waldemir? I don't know. In response, Slayer brought on board former Forbidden drummer Paul Bostaff to take over the percussion duties. Slayer had many auditions for the vacant rhythm spot and had a huge shoes to fill. Bostaff played through the songs with them once, and after he waited for the guys to come into the room to jam. So he told the story of like he was sitting there like and he was like warming up and he was like warming up for like 20 minutes and like finally like fucking one of them came in. I can't remember exact one. If somebody came in and shook his hand and he's like, okay, cool, we're going to jam. And then he like walked out of the room and he's like, okay, well, I'll just keep warming up. And then like fucking like Hanneman came in there and he's like, okay, hey, dude, what's up or whatever. And then he left. Then he was like in there for like an hour or something, fucking just playing the drums by himself, waiting for him to fucking come in. It was kind of a funny story. So, but after they went through the songs, he said they just went through the songs once. And like both staff like messed up one of the songs at one spot or whatever. And he's like, fuck, I ain't going to get this job, you know? And, but he was thinking they were going to like go through the songs again. But like soon as they were done, like all the guys just took off their guitars and set them down and shit. He's like, they didn't say nothing to him at all. He was just like, oh, I guess I don't have the fucking job, you know? And then they must have went out and like discussed or whatever, you know, amongst themselves or whatever. And he was like, they were like, this is the guy right here. This is the fucking dude. Like, this is the guy that's going to replace Dave. And they just knew it. Because they had auditioned multiple drummers and like they were just saying like some of them just didn't have it. But like after they played with Paul, they were like, this is the guy for the job. So Bostaff's first studio endeavor with a band was spirited medley of the 3 exploited songs War, UK, and Disorder, which featured rapper Ice-T. This track was part of the Judgment Night movie soundtrack in 1983.
Must own. Yeah. Good soundtrack, especially for metal fans who like rap music. This is one of the few things that existed early on at the time that fused those two things very well. So the Judgment Night soundtrack, if you guys like to get into some rap metal, do it.
So with that, with Bostaff joining the band and then moving on from Paul or from Dave Lombardo, that's actually where we're going to end part 1 of the Slayer series. We're about halfway through it here, so I think that's a good spot to end. Make sure you guys tune back in next time and listen to part 2 of Slayer as we finish it off. There's a lot of gems in there, some fun stuff, and we are going to have the legacy that Slayer left at the end, and then you'll know the future of Slayer and where they went. So just want to thank you guys. Thanks, John, for sitting in on it. Appreciate it, homie. Yeah.
To speak more on the Slayer, like just as the albums are rolling out, before we totally close this up, you know, South of Heaven, moving on from Rain and Blood, what a gamble, right? Yeah. What a gamble to not try to repeat that album at all, right? But then to take the flack from your fan base and others about South of Heaven, oh man, it's not Rain and Blood. I don't like that. But double down and come back with Seasons in the Abyss and be like, sorry you didn't like the last album, but here's another edition of it, but better even perhaps, you know, like more refined, you know. And I don't feel Rain and Blood elements in Seasons in the Abyss.
No,
I don't feel it. I mean, it's maybe it's harder than South of Heaven in some way. I think it's just it's South of Heaven moving in that direction.
Yeah, I always thought that every record they put out, purely musically, the lyrics were always hard, right?
Right, sure.
But musically, every record got darker.
Okay.
Slayer is the only, to me, maybe I'm off on this, but from Megadeth and the Big Four,
sure,
they're the only band that, as they continued all the way through into the 2000s, that were more violent.
Oh yeah,
more nasty.
Yeah,
and that's not a critique on Metallica or Megadeth or Anthrax. Like, to me, it was like Anthrax was the band that would play the house party.
Sure.
Megadeth was more technical, Metallica was more fun, and Slayer was like, if you were going to hell, they were probably going to greet you, right?
Yeah, I mean, Slayer, probably the rowdiest of all 4 of those bands, and when you get to Divine Intervention, where we're leaving it off, I think they were at the top of their game. So they had done so much for metal up to this point, you know, just from 85, they basically helped launch death metal, a whole genre with Hallowed, and then they decided to say, we're going to continue doing Slayer and not do death metal or be a part of death metal. We're just going to do what we do, and I thought they did it very well. The first half of their career for me is, you know, all S tier. Well, you know, I guess when you get to Rain and Blood, Hell Awaits, Rain and Blood, South of Heaven, Seasons, Divine, like those are all, they're not the same, and I love them all the same though.
Yeah, going from South of Heaven, like if you really kind of break it down, those songs were all a little bit slower, a little bit groovier. They're all just kind of mid-tempo. There's not that punk influence. But then if you get into Seasons, we're opening the fucking thing with War Ensemble, so you're kind of like, okay, well, fuck, we're coming back with this in your fucking face. Like,
we're back. Slayer's back. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I remember the first band I was in. We tried to cover Mandatory Suicide. Like so of all the stuff you could have picked, it was the one from South of Heaven, which would have been one of the slower songs.
Yeah, but Mandatory Suicide goes in hardest probably for
on that
album.
Yeah, lyrically everything. But even
I loved playing that song. Jay and I would actually, if I recall correctly, we would play it in a drop D tuning. Unnecessary, but fun.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
like as I recall, just because for the sake of the set where it fit, we would just do it in a drop D format or something. So that was super fun playing that song in drop D.
Yeah, we actually played that whole Slayer set. We learned like 6 or 7 songs, and we played the whole.
Yeah, we did a. I don't know if you probably don't remember. We used to do a Slayer medley.
Oh, okay.
Because I ran, for the musicians out there, I ran no noise gate when I played live. I just went guitar cable, guitar straight into the head.
Okay.
I didn't give a shit.
Right.
If I had time in my brain, I couldn't stop and play a breakdown because I get feedback. So that's where Slayer fit perfectly, because I would just hit the damn thing and I just put the pickup straight next to the speaker and let it just scream, and we would kick into Raining Blood. Because that intro was that screaming feedback nonsense. So it was like, oh, this is perfect. So, yeah, we would do Raining Blood. Damn it, I can't remember parts. Oh, the groove part in Angel of Death.
Okay,
you remember? We would do that, and then I don't remember the other one. But that was like I absolutely insisted. I was like, no, we're doing something with Slayer. I don't give a shit. We're doing something.
Jay, you said you saw them live?
Twice. Yeah.
John?
5 times.
5
all
times.
with Jeff too.
Wow. Yeah. All with Jeff even. My man. 0. I'm a poser, so
0?
I'm on the 0 scale and I'm out of the podcast.
I wish I would have I wish I would have seen him on the very last leg, and I just didn't get around to seeing him. I'm like, man, I need to see these guys. I know they're going to be done or whatever, but yeah, I did get to see them. Unfortunately, I seen the Pantera Slayer.
Me too.
Morbid Angel.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I was at that show too.
Was that Scrape Deltaplex?
Yep.
Was that
Static X too? And Static X got shit thrown at them.
That was
because they were before Slayer.
That was
rough.
Was it the Van Andel?
Yeah, Van Andel.
Yeah.
Oh,
and I missed Morbid Angel, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So I was really fucking depressed because I was like, that was the band I wanted to see, and they're playing like a fucking basically arena or whatever. But I did get to see Morbid Angel later on down the line, so I made up for that. But yeah, I seen him there, and then so that was super cool. And then the other time I seen him was Tattoo the Earth Festival, so it was like not their show, but they did play for like 40 minutes or something, so it was cool to see him. And that was a hell of a fucking show. Slayer, Slipknot, Sepultura, like fucking that
good
was
show.
a crazy fucking show. So.
Mudvayne too.
Yep, Mudvayne.
I think the first
Seven Dust.
That was the first metal show I actually went to. The first
shit.
Yeah,
Tattoo the Earth.
No, the one with Morbid Angel, Pantera,
no shit.
Static
Nice.
X.
No shit.
What's funny is Wayne from Static X is from this area.
Yeah.
Which I remember knowing that back then and thinking it was going to be some kind of like homecoming. They got booed off the stage. And it's not that they sucked, but they played before Slayer. And for the people, again, that don't understand, that era in the that was early 2000, maybe 2000.
That was new metal
that
era.
was reinventing the Steel Pantera just before God Hates Us All.
Yeah.
But at that point, that was maybe the pinnacle of that freak, psychotic Slayer, like you were talking about, where you couldn't play after them. Maybe Pantera or Metallica. That was it.
Yeah.
There was no 2 other bands that could possibly do it. And I remember them, Static X, actually on stage saying, if you throw anything else on this stage, we're leaving. Dude, they got hammered. People just whip shit. And it's not. I'm not trying to pick on Static X. Like, all credit to them.
Yeah.
But it was like, man, you're dealing with the most rabid, psychotic, lunatic fan base at the time, and it was like, man, don't say that because they're gonna do it, and they did.
Yeah.
And Slayer came out and fucking crushed it.
You don't want to antagonize that mob, and plus Static X, as cool and as fun as they are, don't really fit the bill when you're talking about Morbid Angel and Slayer, and then you want to go, you push it. Like, it's just not enough.
Scrape played too, which was another new metal band.
I barely remember them.
They played after Morbid Angel. Because when we got there, they were like just setting up or about to start, and I was like, okay, I can't wait for Morbid Angel. And they're like, yeah, they already played. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Morbid Angel is like a fucking real band, and you guys got these new metal fucking hacks playing after them? What the fuck?
Scrape was short-lived, and as new metal as it they were the most like, I look back. I went back and actually listened to them in the last year. Like, I remember them. What did they say? Dude, it was as though a record label said, we need to make a new metal thing. Let's make Scrape.
Yeah.
It was like, okay. I mean, I'm not trying to be too
Like
much of a critic.
Right,
They toured, they did it,
Yeah.
but I wasn't a new metal guy in any capacity.
I
respect
had
it.
some new metal blood flowing through me, but
I respect it more now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
15 years ago, you couldn't even talk about Korn in front of me. I don't want that's trash. It's garbage.
Yeah.
You're gonna tell me that shit's metal when I'm over here listening to Hate Eternal and like ruthless fucking metal. And but now I'm like, I was just an ignorant kid.
Yeah.
Like I respect all that shit.
Everything
like,
has its time and place.
Yeah,
right?
sure. Those bands helped elevate what we're talking about. There's
Yeah.
a lot of fans of extreme metal that wouldn't be without Korn or Slipknot or you know.
I don't want to get too far off topic.
Sorry,
but
yeah.
No, you're good. I was just going to speak on that. It's like, but if it wasn't for Korn, there wouldn't be a Slipknot, and if it wasn't for a Slipknot, I don't think metal would be where it's at today.
No, I agree.
I don't care what anybody says.
Same.
Slipknot, it was the fucking pinnacle band, and they've gotten big enough in order to bring some of these guys that wanted the rappy shit and the new metal, got them merged over to heavier shit, and then those kind of kids started liking deathcore and fucking Slayer, because there wouldn't be a Suicide Silence or deathcore if there wasn't for a Slipknot or a Korn.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I agree.
There's so many
it's
things
just
to say.
a time and place for that.
Yeah,
You know?
there's
That
so
might
many-
be a whole good fucking episode.
It
Right
would,
there.
it would be about
You know,
Slipknot.
just
Slipknot's almost. I bet, like in their eye, it's almost an unknowing contribution to how much they've elevated.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't believe it would be where it is without Slipknot.
Yeah, I
really
agree.
don't.
I don't think there would be Killswitch and all that
No.
New England and fucking
Well,
metal and
there's-
like, you know.
There's so much to be said for what Slipknot did for metal when they came on. Now, again, we're talking about Diablos and Musica was out. Reinventing the Steel was out.
Yeah.
I think we're talking about Load 1 and 2, and I think
and then-
Anthrax had put out like Stomp and Volume 8. So like, where are our heroes? And I don't feel like anybody was really carrying the flag. Now, no diss on any of those bands, but their best work was behind them at that time, in my opinion. And Jay and I, in the moment, we were like, we need something more. And Slipknot came along, and they looked silly, and people got their opinions of them. But what they were doing with metal music right there, man, they saved it. That's just my opinion. Y'all can hate me and come at me sideways about it.
I
but
don't think it's no hate. I think if you know anything about music and metal music, that it's a very important part. And I also think to the diversity, because of Corey's vocals. Yeah, he did some rapping, but then he added the singing and the heavy shit and more of the death metal stuff with the backing vocals. So it's like he kind of brought it all around. That's why I said there wouldn't probably be a Killswitch if there wasn't a fucking Slipknot.
There was no bridge.
Yeah,
there was no bridge from one section of metal to the other.
Yeah.
Slipknot they created the bridge.
Yeah,
But
they were the bridge.
But to connect them with Slayer, I actually saw them play with I believe it was God Forbid, Slayer, and Slipknot.
Oh, nice.
I don't remember the tour name, but it was at the Deltaplex, right? So small, not small, but
smaller.
Intimate.
And I remember going there and being at the time shocked that Slipknot headlined over Slayer. But now I look back and I'm like, well, I mean, that was their era. That was just after Iowa, where they were just I mean they're big now, but they were just so massive. But I remember actually being pissed off, all ignorant, and man, fucking Slayer playing before Slipknot, like shit. Like, and I look back now, and I'm like, you could have just enjoyed yourself.
Yeah,
You got to see Slayer, dude.
we all been there.
But
But that's a testament to Slipknot's power when they came out, is that they were headlining Slayer.
Yeah. And they gave it wasn't like Slayer played 20 minutes. It didn't feel like they were an opening band.
Oh, it was probably a co-headliner.
Yeah,
especially if it was only those three bands. I'm sure
I
they
remember
both had equal time.
I remember the ticket actually said Slipknot/Slayer.
So equal billing, equal stage time, co-headliner. Yeah.
All right. Well, that being said, I want to thank everybody for tuning into this. Hopefully, you guys learned something about Slayer. Maybe, hopefully, it's one of your favorite bands and you really enjoyed this episode. Like I said, I love diving into it and learning more all the time about metal. And Slayer is one of those things where I got to give them their flowers. So that's why I did the episode. John, thanks for being a guest today. I really appreciate you coming by.
Thanks, John.
And yeah, if you guys want to subscribe to the Metal Maniacs on YouTube, like our Facebook page, all that good shit, like give us reviews. We got polls on the Spotify. If you could answer those and tell us what your bands are. If there's anything that you guys want us to cover also, any topics, any bands, anything like that, we're open for whatever ideas, because we want this to be a metal community. We want this to be an open forum and conversation. We want to get everybody involved. And so far, thanks for everybody who's checked out the podcast and gave us support, and we really appreciate that. So with that being said, we'll see you guys next week. It'll drop Halloween, so we're in spooky season right now. So, much love to you guys.